If you love wilderness, you have to love Australia. I mean, take a look at it. It's vast. It's a beautiful continent.
I'm going to venture into the heart of some of the wildest places on Earth.
That's the raw energy of nature. Golly.
Across the remote outback.
Oh, what was that? Oh, a big one.
Into the big blue ocean. And high over the mountains.
Well, it should be a great place to look for eagles. Yeah.
With my team, I'm going to discover the incredible life that thrives here in all its beauty and variety.
I just saw one. This is one of the most incredible sights in nature.
This is the Australian wilderness. This time, I'm going to navigate through some of the largest tropical tides in the world. I'm heading to the tip of the Dampier Peninsula in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. This pristine peninsula sits in the middle of the Indian Ocean, so the best way to explore it is to take to the water.
Well, there she is, a wonderful sight. The sun rising. It's 6:15 in the morning, and I'm sitting in this boat just off the Dampier Peninsula in northwest Australia. It points up there like a finger. It's a fantastic part of Australia to explore.
I'll be travelling around the tip of the peninsula through the fast waters of the east to the turquoise creeks of the west, in search of how both wildlife and people live in an ever-changing landscape. Twice a day, the peninsula gets struck by the raw power of giant tropical tides. At 12 metres high, they are some of the largest on the planet.
The coastline here is incredibly convoluted. I reckon if you stretched it out in a straight line, it would go halfway around the world. And you also get the highest concentration of islands and islets in the world in this area. The combined effect is to channel the water through a narrow area. You get an incredibly strong tidal effect here. It's truly astonishing. Okay, James, let her rip.
Local marine biologist James Brown knows these powerful waters well. As the tide gathers speed towards the peninsula, it's forced through narrow channels between the islands, creating a treacherous body of water.
This is going to get a bit rough. All right, hang on.
When I look at the shore here, I realise we're hardly moving at the moment. We're actually going backwards. Water's 100 metres deep here, 500 metres across this channel, and it flows between 13 and 15 knots.
You don't come out here without a sense of a little bit of trepidation every single time. Doesn't matter how often you've done it. It's quite unpredictable. It's just so much energy.
So, imagine you're a 17th or 18th century navigator in a wooden ship and you come through here. Take a look at this. No maps, no engine, just sails, and a whole lot of luck. It must have been terrifying. They were so brave, I have to tell you. It was like flying to the moon in a mussel shell. Wow, look at these white horses. That's amazing. That's the raw energy of nature. Golly.
We've made it through the faster water, but that's not the only tidal feature here that can catch you out.
You can really see here how the current is changing direction, all the more treacherous with these changing eddies and whirlpools that you find in this area.
Whirlpools are created when ocean currents collide against each other and the coastline. The water twists away and spins rapidly with great force. And this creates a powerful vortex that, if big enough, could pull you under if you fell in. Luckily for me, James knows the right course out of here and into calmer waters.
Take a look at this. You can see the water pouring off the top of this reef that's been exposed by the low tide. That, of course, is hidden when the tides are high. It's a solid bar.
This is a tidal phenomenon. The tide falls faster than the water can escape from the top of the reef, so it pours down the side of the exposed coral, creating this waterfall in the middle of the ocean.
When people think about the dangers of the Australian coastline, they always say, oh yeah, there are sharks and there are crocodiles and stingrays and jellyfish. But you know, those are just sideshows. The real dangers here are hidden reefs like that one.
The quieter waters provide a feeding ground for local wildlife. Terns are attracted to the nutrients and fish that have been brought in by the churning currents.
There's a real feeding frenzy going on here. Of course, the obvious thing are the terns, but there are also bigger fish feeding here as well. So the tide has stirred up the nutrients, has created opportunities for small fish to feed, and then of course larger fish feed on them and the terns. And I dare say somewhere around here there are even bigger fish looking for a meal as well.
Terns have excellent eyesight and can spot fish up to 4 meters under the water. The glare from the sun on the ocean doesn't bother them because they have oil in their eyes that acts like natural sunglasses. On sighting a fish, terns plunge dive into the water, but emerge quickly so they don't get caught out by the strong currents. And so we don't get caught out, James is steering us towards Shell Island, a tiny refuge from the ocean. To get onto the island, James Brown switches his boat into wheels, Bond style.
Isn't that neat? That's definitely the way to come ashore. No waiting at boat ramps, it's perfect. Wow, look at this. Is this an island?
Well, it's an island some of the times, it's an islet. So in the low tide, we can walk right across to the headland. Right. And of course, at high tide, this gets completely covered up. But we're here at low tide.
We're on the lookout for a pearl oyster shell, the Pinctada maxima.
The pearl shell will live through this kind of reefy area. They essentially look like rocks.
So you've got your eye tuned in.
Over here, I think, Ray?
That looks just like a rock. Wow, that's huge. Look at the size of that.
This is the biggest pearl shell species in the world, and there are literally millions of shell that wasn't known about to the rest of the world. Of course, Aboriginal tribes have known about it for millennia, but the rest of the world only really found out about this sort of in the 1860s, 1870s, and of course, just a boom. And before you knew it, this shell was supplying 80% of the world's buttons.
That's amazing, isn't it? Is that one there? The tide's coming in here, isn't it? Yep, I've hit pay dirt.
Oh yeah.
Can we open one up and have a look inside?
Let's do it.
This species of pearl shell is thought to produce the world's rarest and most valuable pearls.
All right. So what we're going to do is, because they've got such strong muscles, I'm going to try and get in there relatively quickly.
Pearls are the only gems that are made by a living creature. When a piece of irritating grit gets into the shell, the oyster covers it with layers of shiny liquid as an act of defense. When this liquid hardens, it becomes a pearl. It's the moment of truth. Are we in the money?
You only find a natural pearl in 1 in every 10,000 shell of this particular species, so they're very rare.
No payday here, but there is one surprise inside the pearl oyster shell.
So here you can see a little crab.
Yes.
Almost every single shell will have one of these. His job is to keep it clean and neat and tidy.
That's amazing.
And in return, he gets a little place to live.
So 1 in 10,000. Obviously today, we can culture pearls inside oysters. And that's fascinating in its own right.
James's family farm culture pearls. artificially placing a piece of shell into the oyster to speed up the pearling process.
I'll show you.
Look at that. Wow. That's amazing. Isn't that beautiful? That's stunning.
Yeah.
But the pearl is not the only gem found in the oyster shell. The meat around the pearl is a delicacy.
And if you're going to eat one, what do you have to do to this?
Well, from here, if we wanted to prepare it so that we could get the abductor muscle out, we would peel back the mantle.
And that's it.
We can cut that off. It's just like a scallop.
Isn't that beautiful, though? Stunning.
Oh, is that off? No, there you go.
You think that's a bit mean?
Well, you can have the
Biggest
whole
oyster
thing.
in the world, and he gives me a bit. That's 1 centimetre by 5 mil. That's delicious. James, I'd really like to eat the rest of that oyster, but if we don't get a move on, we're going to be washed away by the tide.
As the tide starts to rise and the sun begins to set, we follow the coastline further around the peninsula, where I'll be spending the night.
Well, that's a little better than a swag in the bush, isn't it? That's my accommodation for the night. James, thank you very much.
James's family have been producing cultured pearls in this area since the 1950s and have allowed me to stay in one of the traditional family homes on the headland at Signet Bay. This completes my journey along the east coast of the peninsula. Tomorrow I'm going to work my way down the west coast to see how people in the area live alongside giant tides. But before I turn in, there's a famous local site to be seen.
Isn't that a fantastic way to end the day? You see the moon rising over the sea there, and people call that light that plays off the water the stairway to the moon. It's a very good description.
I'm journeying around the Dampier Peninsula in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. This unspoilt piece of land sticks out into the vast Indian Ocean and twice a day sees some of the highest tropical tides in the world.
That's lovely to see. As the tide's coming in, so of course there's a lot more activity in the marine wildlife. It's a mother and her calf. It's an Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphin. And they're just having a whale of a time. And probably the mother's teaching the calf how to hunt. There's a fish in here called a long tom, and they like to drive them out into the shallows where it's easier to get them. What a great thing to see. Lovely. And look at that beach. Not a deck chair in sight.
James has returned to give me and my team a lift, taking us further around the peninsula to the western side.
Now here's a thought. When you take all of the world's marine environments, it's less than 4% is what we could say is unspoiled, has had relatively little human interaction. Most of that's found in the Antarctic and the Arctic, but also here. In fact, this is the largest expanse of unspoiled tropical marine environment. It's amazing. Well, James, thank you very much for that. That was brilliant.
Anytime, Ray.
I'll see you soon. Do you want me to give you a push out?
That'd be great. Thanks, mate.
So long.
The giant tides not only influence the landscape and wildlife, but also the few people that live here. This region is occupied by fewer people per square kilometre than almost anywhere else on Earth.
Hey, Brian.
Hi, man.
Nice to see you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, good to be here.
Brian Lee is from the Aboriginal Bardi Jawi community and has lived with these tides all his life. Bardi Jawi are known as the saltwater people, and Brian is showing me what it's like to live somewhere so affected by the ocean.
You can see here,
What do you call this bush?
it's a garabal bush,
Garabal.
body for bird.
Look at that. That's the flower of this little bush. Does that or not look like a little bird? Isn't that incredible?
Years ago, when the tides were like this now, full tide, people had no access to fresh water. So early in the morning they would gather a whole lot of these in a bowl, and throughout the day they would break a piece and
rely on the sugar in there.
Rely on the sugar to
Yeah.
give them energy to be sustained throughout the day.
And inside you can see glistening there, that's nectar. And that's just beautiful. Gosh, that's delicious. Amazing. That your truck?
Yeah, well, head up here, mate.
With a sugary fix, we're good to get going. We're following an inlet to Hunter's Creek, a secluded area perfect for foraging, but it's only accessible at low tide, so we need to get there quickly.
Wow. This is really beautiful.
It's a good spot.
Wow, that's quite a place, Brian. I see the tide's coming in now.
Yeah.
You've got the seashore, the beach, you've got the estuary and the creek. It must be quite a diverse range of bush tuckers that you use here.
For us, it's mostly all seafood. Crabs and fish and shellfish and oysters and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I guess it gets refreshed by the tide.
Every 6 hours, the tide comes in and goes out again.
So the tide's really important to you.
Very important for this type of ecosystem.
The edge of the creek is surrounded by mangroves. These trees grow in water 100 times saltier than most plants can tolerate. They filter out the salt through their leaves. And to help them survive the daily flooding, they grow roots out of the ground like snorkels to enable them to breathe. Mangroves provide sanctuary for fiddler crabs, kingfishers, and kites in this challenging environment. And mudskippers like to rest among the roots. They are fish, but spend a lot of time out of the ocean. They can breathe both in and out of water and use their fins as crutches to walk around at low tide.
A couple of days ago, Brian asked me if I'd like to come foraging here. So he's sending me out with Egon, his nephew. So I think that'd be really interesting. We're not the only ones, though, hunting. You can see up there, as the tide comes in, there's an osprey gull hanging, waiting for opportunities on the oncoming tide.
And we only have a 15-minute window to try to catch something to eat.
Okay.
The ocean has been pivotal in the lives of the saltwater people for over 50,000 years. They rely on seafood to make up a large part of their diet.
So we're looking for mud crabs.
Egon, is this the best moment now the tide's coming in? Because I noticed we got a lot of little crabs seem to come out just before the tide arrives.
Yeah, it seems like the mud crabs are more active when the tide's coming in. So is a lot of the fish because they tend to get hungry.
So one of the secrets to finding food is knowing exactly what moment in the tide to go out and find things. You have to attune your whole life to the tide.
Yeah, everything works around the tide, whether that be during the night or, early hours of the morning.
That's the true meaning of Aboriginal time.
That's true. This tide's really coming in now.
Yeah, it certainly is.
And we're starting to see just how quickly this environment changes.
Guys, I'm just a little bit concerned that you might not get back onto shore with all your equipment. So I think what we should do now is go back up on shore because the tide's coming real fast. It's an astonishing tide here. You see how fast it's coming in. And this line of vegetation, that shows yesterday's high tide. So you can see how far that's going to come in. But what we'll do now is we'll watch, because as the tide comes in, so bigger fish will come in.
It's all hands on deck if we're to catch anything to eat.
We've got every method at work now. I'm standing on the shore watching for fish coming past or any crabs. Egon's out, he's gone across into a slow flowing bay there to check that out. And we've got the rod and line going.
And it's Brian that hits the jackpot.
Nice one, Brian. What have you got there?
Golden trevally, mate.
That's what's just been skipping up
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
river, isn't it?
it's
Yeah.
just
Lovely.
Now we pull him in.
This golden trevally fish, similar to a mackerel, only takes minutes to cook over a traditional outback open fire.
Looks pretty good.
There you go, Ray.
Thank you very much, Brian. Let's taste
It's a bit hot.
this. Yeah, it's still hot. Oh, it's delicious. Lovely and moist. Perfectly cooked. I'll give you a Michelin star for that.
Thank you.
Further along the western coast, Brian is keen to show me an extraordinary sight. He won't tell me exactly where we're going because the Bardi Jawi people want to keep this location a secret.
Okay, Ray, can I have a look up here, mate? So walking along here, and we see footprints here,
Wow.
fossilised human footprints. It's a very special place here. It's not recognisable straight away.
I would never have known. Amazing.
We reckon anywhere between 10 and 20,000 year old.
Incredible. I mean, look at that.
This one here with the footprint up there,
Yeah.
and then there's that one there,
And there.
there, and there.
As people walked across the soft mud thousands of years ago, they left their footprints, which baked in the sun. The tides covered them with a thin layer of silt, sealing the footprints and creating a fossil.
What do you think they would have been looking for here? What would have made them run here?
Well, they would have been going to the pools up here to spear fish or to see, as the tide goes out, to see if there were any turtles stranded in the pools.
And how long have your people known about these tracks?
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
Taking Brian's secret with me, I leave him to continue my journey along the west coast towards Cape Levesque. As the sun is setting, my end destination appears to glow in front of me. These iron-rich cliffs are only found in this part of Australia and are unlike anything I've ever seen.
Well, there it is. The sun setting on the west coast of the Dampier Peninsula. This really is a landscape sculpted by the force of the tides. I mean, take a look at that shoreline. It's incredible. It's of course made this part of Australia somewhat inhospitable. There are no ports here. There are no great cities. But what it means is that you can come here today and see a pristine maritime ecosystem. It's a really good way of judging our footprint, our human footprint in other parts of the world.